Chapter 36, The Spanish Pyrenees by Wim Hof. Our drive from the Netherlands took us through Belgium, France, and finally Spain. Justin slept a lot because he was still very jet-lagged from the traveling, but in that time, Dennis and I conversed in Dutch and got to know each other on a deeper level. He expressed that he came on the trip because he wanted to learn more about the Iceman from the intellectual side. When we passed through the south of France, the atmosphere changed. The architecture of the buildings looked older and much more unique. Eventually, we crossed the France border and entered the País Tunnel, leading us into Spain. As we drove through the Sierra de Guara, which is a desert-like area just south of the Spanish Pyrenees, I had a strange feeling. It had been 10 years since I was last in the Spanish Pyrenees. I felt like I was finally coming home. We arrived at 2 a.m. and found Einem sleeping in a hammock at the campsite. He had arrived a day earlier and set up the tent so that we could crash as soon as we got there. It was a long day of driving, so we left the introductions for the following day. Sunshine greeted us in the morning. It was a typical day in the Spanish Pyrenees. When I opened my eyes, I noticed a Bacata biguinois tree to my side. They are well known for providing a lot of shade as well as large beans. We met for coffee at the restaurant located on site and discussed our plans for the day. Eventually, we all decided to start with canyoning and end with quinting. Canyoning is a great way to become one with nature. It's very playful and an exciting experience. Water channels that eroded away at the space between the mountains produced the canyons in the Pyrenees. We now use ropes and other safety equipment to rappel down it. We left our car on site, and we all drove together in Einem's van. Einem is a 28-year-old who loves spending his time canyoning. He's a tall guy with a very contagious smile. He loves the outdoors and is a very enthusiastic gentleman. His most recent goal has been to set up a canyoning business. He wants me to join him because I have a lot of experience. I worked for 9 years as a guide through the Spanish Pyrenees. Spain is like my second home. Einem drives like a racer. We had to hold our bodies against the force of every turn he made. We drove through the desert-like region until we had reached our first canyon, the Barranco del Rio. The Barranco del Rio is what we call a water canyon. This means that inside the canyon, there are many holes and paths filled with water. Sometimes the holes in the canyon are as deep as 50 meters, which is 164 feet. To get to the bottom, we must crawl, jump, and balance on top of rocks and push ourselves to descend further and further down the canyon. On the way down, the beauty of our surroundings are revealed. Descending can feel like you're trying to find your way through a labyrinth. Mysterious places are all around, and it can sometimes be cathartic, especially if there's cold water flowing along the path, which there usually is. The shadows danced across the rocky walls as the sun changed its position. The sound of our voices echoed against the rocks. The mouth at the bottom of the canyon opened into a large emerald lake. Warm water greeted us as we exited. Dennis and I coated our bodies with mud from the bottom of the shallow lake. We let the sun dry the mud on our skin to give us a makeover. The mud cleans the surface of the body and gives a nice, smooth feeling. We had a lot of fun enjoying our stay in Sierra de Guara. After a quick picnic and a good bath, we threw our rucksacks back on, wrapped our ropes, and began hiking our way back up the mountain to where we had parked the van. The heat of the Spanish summer soon had us sweating, but the panorama was beautiful, and the lake was enthralling. After hiking through the densely covered mountains with many trees and bushes, we finally found our way back to the parked van where we had started hours before. We placed our equipment in the back of the van and continued to our next activity, quinting. The drive was bumpy again as Einem kept his foot on the pedal. After several minutes, we had arrived at our Quinting bridge. The bridge was raised at about 60 meters, 200 feet over the water. I knew what to expect because I had quinted hundreds of times before with many other people, but the last time that I did it was just over 10 years ago. I fell silent with excitement. Quinting is an activity where one person has one end of 2 ropes tied to their harness, while the other end is tied to the bridge. Before putting the ropes on the individual, they are pulled underneath the bridge and tied to the opposite side of the railing. Then, the person fastens the rope to their harness using carabiners and jumps off. The ropes that are tied to the other end of the bridge cause the person to fall straight down until the rope catches them, and at that point, the person swings back and forth from side to side until they lose the momentum. You could think of it as like a gigantic swing. During those first few seconds of freefall, it is very common to feel like there is an imminent danger of falling to your death. The tension of the abyss is enormous, and sometimes will prevent people from taking the plunge. However, with little encouragement, most are willing to try. I decided to go first to make sure that the ropes were connected properly. Not knowing is always a scary feeling, but I had experience and was ready to complete my first jump in 10 years. I took a few careful breaths and began concentrating. One of the most important things to remember when quinting is that you must jump straight off the bridge. Any other angle can prove dangerous because you will enter the possibility of swinging into the bridge. I jumped. The first few seconds of freefall are the best part of quinting. I continually picked up speed until the ropes caught me and swung me to the other side. Knowing that you are capable of overcoming hesitation can be a powerful tool. It's an amazing feeling that gives you the boost of adrenaline and a rush of endorphins. After my ride ended, I connected myself to another wire that they had thrown down. I then lowered myself into the water below. After 20 minutes of preparation, it was Dennis's turn. Dennis is a powerful, analytic thinker. He knows the mind well. All he needed to jump off the bridge was a decision that he was going to be stronger than the fear, which he was. After saying mental power, Dennis jumped backward into the abyss. After another 20 minutes, it was Justin's turn to jump. Regardless of seeming nervous and tense, he jumped backward off the bridge without any hesitation whatsoever. Although, after a few minutes of swinging back and forth, Justin's motion sickness had kicked in and he began to throw up. He was successful, but a slave to his genetic disposition. After Justin had detached himself and swam to shore, it was Ainam's turn. But no one knew he was going. He jumped off the side of the bridge while no one was looking. The experience of adventure is what Ainam lives for. After Ainam disconnected himself and returned to the top of the bridge, we disconnected the ropes and returned to our van. We all felt different, accomplished. On the way home, we stopped by a river where there was a bridge 9 meters, 29.5 feet high. Justin still felt a little sick, so he stayed in the car while the rest of us went to leap off the bridge. From the bridge, Ainam backflipped, I dove, and Dennis jumped. When we returned to the campsite, we made pasta with a nice mixture of vegetables and wine. Ainam and I played guitar together and sang a beautiful tune. The next day, we traveled to a canyon 50 kilometers, 31 miles away, called La Pinilla. The canyon was known for its large repelling walls made of limestone. Wild horses and other fauna surrounded us as we made our way to the top of the canyon. When we had reached the top, we put on our harnesses, prepared our ropes, and got our cameras ready. It'd be a few hours before we reached the bottom of the canyon, so we also had to mentally prepare ourselves. We groped, jumped, and balanced our way to the bottom of the first repelling wall. Repelling is a calming movement down the rocky walls in nature. You have to surrender yourself to the materials protecting you. It can be scary at times, but you have to overcome that fear. Once you begin, there's no turning back. The only option is down. When rappelling, people tend to hold on to the rocks and stay as close as possible to the wall. This is the complete opposite of what is necessary. It's important to make sure that there is never any slack in the rope. To do this, you must lean back at all times and stay focused on having your feet flat on the surface. Yes, it may be scary because it's an unnatural position to be in, but it's a necessity to rappel safely. Once accustomed to the material and the way of using it, it's easy to go down very quickly. At the point when the inhibitions vanish, you are able to enjoy the scenery and view the great panoramas. It's a hands-on way to enjoy nature. Sometimes, people expect happiness to just enter their lives and change them from the outside, but it doesn't work like that. Those people need to work things out inside themselves. Happiness must spread from the inside out. I know this because I did a lot of problem solving to answer my own riddles. It took me a lot of time and confidence before I could view the world in color, rather than only black and white. For a while, I was emotionally disturbed. I looked for all kinds of challenges to take my mind off worrying. Eventually, I found out that nature was the answer for me that I was looking for all along. The answer varies from person to person, but that is because each person has his or her own path. We need to contemplate and look inside ourselves. Contemplation is the last stage before clarity. Try to open your mind and experience the world for what it is, not what you want it to be. When we finally got to the bottom of La Pinilla, we went swimming in a beautiful sapphire blue river. Ainam left to go pick up the van while Justin, Dennis, and myself got to swim around. It was very relaxing after a long day of rappelling. When Ainam had returned, we went back to the campsite and made dinner. Guitar music and laughter filled the air until we grew tired and fell asleep. The next morning, we woke at 5 a.m. We had planned to go climb and rappel a gigantic canyon, El Mascon. Ainam was not able to come on the trip because he made plans elsewhere, but Justin and Dennis were ready for anything. We drove through the early morning and crossed Sierra de Guara. After 3 hours of curvy roads, we had finally reached the little village of Rodear, which is at the border of the natural reserve for the Sierra de Guara. El Mascon is the Arabic name of the place that represents where spirits reside. For that reason, people in ancient times would avoid the canyon because of the sinister atmosphere. In reality, El Mascon is a living museum with gigantic monoliths everywhere. There are fossilized rocks at the top of the canyon at 1,100 meters, 3,608 feet. The mountain is the result of tectonic plates moving throughout the thousands of years. We got out of the car and took our backpacks up the winding path of the mountain. Soon, we began to see the mountain for the beautiful place that it was. Cars are not allowed near the mountain, so anyone who wants to rappel it needs to hike a trail for many hours before they can begin to descend. When we reached the top, iron nails attached to ropes greeted us. The view was magnificent. Pine trees surrounded the mountain on all sides. After gearing up, we tied into the ropes and began abseiling. Again, the feeling of overcoming inhibitions washed over me. Where most would feel imminent danger, I felt peace. We all did. Each cliff was a new challenge, one that we always were anxious to overcome. El Mascon didn't let us down. It was full of exhilarating twists and turns, and we were never bored. We'd arrived early in the morning and didn't return until late evening. It had been a beautiful day, and we slept with the weight of success on our shoulders. Then came Monte Bertido. Located in Ordesa National Park, Monte Bertido reigns at 3,355 meters, 11,007 feet. It was the largest mountain we had set our sights on. Aidan was still gone and wouldn't be able to join us for our ascent. What the Monte Bertido lacks in abseiling, it makes up for in terrain. The night before our final expedition, we rested our bodies on a campground a few miles away from Ordesa. After a hearty dinner, we talked about what we had accomplished thus far and what we hoped to gain on Monte Bertido. When the sun slept, so did we. The next morning, we packed up our sleeping bag and drove to a bus station. On the bus ride to Ordesa, we weaved through many narrow turns. For most of the ride, we teetered on the edge of a large crater, similar to America's Grand Canyon. The bus took us to Ordesa at 1,300 meters, 4,265 feet. We grabbed a cup of coffee from the local coffee shop and started the hour hike to the beginning of the Monte Bertido path. Forests full of pine and Fagus sylvatica trees surrounded us. The luscious combination provided beautiful scenery for the hike. Once we arrived at Monte Bertido's trail, the incline became steeper. After an hour and a half of climbing, we made our way past the point at which trees stop growing and the alpine vegetation begins. After a couple more hours, we finally arrived at Cablajas de Corturo. This is the point of the mountain where there is no trail. The only way to continue on the path is to climb up metal nails that are cemented into the wall. Justin, Dennis, and myself had our backpacks and sleeping bags weighing us down. We had brought no climbing equipment with us, but we didn't need it. Our mission was about overcoming inhibitions. If anyone is unfamiliar with this type of climbing, vertigo may be one of the problems that he or she may have to overcome. This was the case for Justin. Despite his fear of heights, he forced himself to continue on with steady hands and careful steps. Even though he may have had a bit of hesitation, he was able to still climb Cablajas de Corturo with ease. In these moments, time seems to stand still. Nothing else matters except for that next step. If your focus is on anything else, you'll fall. These moments can teach us to remain in the present. Dennis was the last to cross the Cablajas de Corturo. He made it swiftly and safely across. A great feeling of accomplishment was present in all of us. We took several minutes to rest and meditate on a rock, hundreds of meters above the ground. After our little break, we continued on our path. When we reached the upper part of the walls facing Ordesa, we pulled ourselves over the cliff. Our eyes were blessed with beauty. Thousands of beautiful blue and purple flowers, known as Iris javigidas, were laid out across the land. There was also a miniature waterfall that opened into a stream, feeding water down the center and over the cliff. It was a surreal atmosphere. To me, this view alone is more beautiful than Mount Everest. It is always the same thing on Everest: rocks, snow, and ice. Nothing grows at that altitude. All life is gone. But on Monte Bertido, the climate changes the higher you climb. Therefore, you pass all kinds of vegetation during the ascent, providing the eyes with new surprises every step of the way. At 2 p.m., we reached a refuge at 2,160 meters, 7,086 feet. We rested for half an hour, raised our expectations, and then set sail for the summit. Normally, a climb to the summit of Monte Bertido should be done on a separate day, after resting at the refuge, but we were determined to continue on. As the path became steeper and more difficult, the air became colder. Justin and I were wearing only shorts and sandals. Dennis was wearing a black t-shirt, pants, and his hiking boots. We had left our sleeping bags and backpacks at the refuge. The people that we passed were astounded when they saw us attempting to summit the snow-covered slopes of Monte Bertido while only wearing limited clothing. At 3,000 meters, 9,842 feet, we were still going strong. The air was thinning out, and the path was becoming steeper. Our minds were being tested to overcome fear and fatigue. We made our way over the snow-covered rocks, climbing along at a slow pace to preserve our energy. After a while, Dennis stopped and decided to turn around. He had done exceptionally well, but in his mind he had already decided to turn back. We told our friend goodbye and continued onward toward the summit. Adorned with great views, we felt like eagles, free from the worries of the world. Our majestic panorama was the result of much physical and mental endurance. It was the fruit of hard labor and constant meditation. Near the final stretch, Justin and I decided to take a break and sat down on two large rocks. "Wim," Justin said, "I was waiting for the right time to tell you about something that has been on my mind for a while. I think now is the perfect time." My ears listened attentively to Justin's every word. Curiosity consumed me. "I was thinking about writing a book entitled Becoming the Iceman. I've been keeping track of all the stuff that we've been doing over the past year, and I think it would make for an incredible book. Ideally, it wouldn't include only the things that I've learned, but your experiences as well. In it," he continued, "I think it'd be great to have stories leading up to what made you the Iceman. If we combine both of our experiences and include the challenges we had to overcome to become Icemen, it may have the potential to inspire others. We could give people the opportunity to become Icemen and Icewomen, especially if the book contained the method and technique." My mind was eager, and my body language began to show it. Yes, this is what I wanted as a book. I didn't just want a book comprised of methods and techniques. I wanted a book full of experiences that would inspire people to become better and give them the knowledge they needed to succeed. This book needs to happen, I thought. "One more thing," Justin said. "I think it would be important to show that it's possible for anyone to do what you have done, to show that we all have the potential inside of us, a skill that just needs to be trained. I think a way we could show this is by you and I breaking a world record together. It could make our words more credible. What do you think?" "Yes," I told him, "we need to break a world record together. It will be like I passing the torch on to you. It will be a lovely way to end the book. This time, I'll come to you. Let's do it in America." It was a marvelous idea and a great concept. Out of excitement and appreciation, we embraced each other. We never finished the climb to the summit, but we came back down in higher spirits than the summit could have ever given us. The idea was reward enough. There was no need to continue on. With a great feeling of success, Justin and I continued our way back down to the refuge. Our stomachs were tightly clenched, telling us to eat immediately. We ate very little that day and climbed more than 3,000 meters, 9,842 feet in height. There were climbers from many different backgrounds at the refuge. At dinner, many languages were spoken around the table: French, Dutch, English, Spanish, German, and even Basque. It's really great to know multiple languages. It helps me communicate and empathize with the random people that I meet on a daily basis. Finishing with wine and food was the perfect way to end our day. There was a lovely sunset outside. Instead of purchasing a room to sleep in that night, we decided to save the little money that we had to purchase breakfast in the morning. That night, we slept in our sleeping bags on a grassy hill outside of the refuge. I counted many stars in the vast night sky as I lay there trying to fall asleep. My mind was too excited to rest. Eventually, my thoughts died down, and then quiet, clear sky helped me doze off into a deep slumber. The next day, we continued down the mountain. Justin was a little more timid because his legs were sore and we had very dangerous slopes to climb down without gear. But because he trusted me, we made it down safely. He got rid of his inhibitions and descended successfully. During our long drive back, Justin and I discussed the possible records we could attempt together. "Well, instead of the barefoot snow run that we were trying to organize in the US," he said, "why don't we try breaking a record together first? Perhaps we could try sitting with our bodies fully exposed in the ice, like you've done in the past." I shook my head. "No, that takes a lot of training and is extremely dangerous, even for myself. No, I know what we should do. We should try to set the fastest time for a 5 and 10 kilometer run, barefoot, through the snow. What do you think?" "I think it's a great idea. However, I'll admit, I have very little training running barefoot through the snow." I could tell from his voice that he was worried. "Do not worry," I assured him. "It will be very easy to learn. Very few people try. If you are determined to do it, you will adapt very quickly. I believe in you. We have to do it for the book." "All right, Wim," Justin replied. "I trust you. Barefoot running in the snow will be our record attempts." The experiences that Dennis, Justin, Ainham, and myself had will never be forgotten. They are deeply rooted in our minds and brought us closer, like a family. Even though our memories of the Spanish Pyrenees will last forever, we now had bigger plans in the making.